Man to man, combat hand to hand, hands locked, ready for the last stand, elbow drops, kicks fade bang. If I connect you, levitate, better settle mate, lights out, knocked out by the heavyweight.
Okay, hi, it's Toby from Heavyweight MMA here today with a new special guest, Mr. Dave Wood, integrated health specialist who focuses on stress management, the ability to remain calm under pressure and peak performance training. How are you today, man?
Very good, thanks, Toby. Toby, isn't it?
Yeah, it's Toby. It's Toby. Now, you've come to my attention, man, through social media, through a great interview with Geordie the fight dietitian, and also through many posts from Israel Adesanya and some of the other CKB guys, man. So obviously related to my channel, which is to do with mixed martial arts, and I'm interested in learning a little bit more about your world, man.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, we've been working with the fighters for a couple of years now, and we've developed a breathing training program and mindset training around that. But yeah, we don't only work with fighters, we work with all sorts of athletes and corporates and anybody who's trying to optimize health and performance.
Now, man, I've seen, as I mentioned, I've seen you working with Israel Adesanya, UFC champ, Blood Diamond, Brad Riddell, Jenna Fabian, Shane Young, Baby Nansen, to name a few. What's the thing that kind of sticks out in your mind when dealing with MMA athletes? So what are some of the characteristics or anything that might have surprised you about working with these guys?
Yeah, I think even just coming into this performance environment, what surprised me is that a lot of these fundamental things like breathing training and sleep hygiene and active recovery, they weren't entrenched in as part of their training, and that surprised me. I don't have a background in performance training. My background's in health science and working as an intensive care paramedic. So yeah, that was all kind of, I guess, new to me when I came into this space. But yeah, that surprised me. But what I like about working with the fighters is that it's raw, like they, I always say, like, you do an interview with a rugby player or a league player or a soccer player, that, it's hard for them to express exactly what they want to say because they're so limited. But what I found refreshing about the fight scene is that there's none of that, they just, there's not all that red tape stuff.
And
refreshing.
Yeah. And just a second ago, you mentioned about being a paramedic. And also I heard you say that you'd been into life-saving as well. Being a paramedic, I know not a lot about it. Obviously, it must be a very, very stressful environment, man.
Yeah, it can be. As a paramedic, you deal with anything you can imagine in the pre-hospital environment. And the way that paramedicine's gone now, it's like taking the resus room from a hospital out into the community. So the paramedics and the intensive care paramedics are very specialized. And we have a lot of autonomy and scope of practice. For an example, as an intensive care paramedic, there's over 25 drugs that you can administer in that pre-hospital setting. And yeah, you deal with scenes that are highly emotive and can be very stressful, and that requires that you have the ability to stay cognitively focused, and that you have a good ability to manage and deal with stress.
Do you think
that's where I guess a lot of the stuff that I'm now bringing into the training that we do with the athletes comes from that environment.
Yeah, man. A friend of mine was a paramedic, and now he's retired. Kind of retired a little bit young, like quite a few years ago. And he was suffering from post-traumatic stress syndrome just from the nature of the job that he was dealing with.
Yeah, I think the burnout rate is pretty high. Like I know in the ambulance service, those guys and girls are non-stop. They clear at the hospital and they go to another job. They might work a 13, 14-hour shift and only get an hour break the entire day. And then they work, night shift on top of that. And you're also dealing with, you're dealing with people that are often aggressive, secondary to alcohol intake or drug intake, and so yeah, it can be it can have an accumulative effect. I know that definitely. I've been doing it for 12 years, and I got out of it full time and am now part time just because of that burnout.
Yeah, and it obviously puts you in good stead to help people to kind of better understand stress management, and then obviously flowing into your work with breathing, etc.
Yeah, what I noticed, when I first started, even from a young age, I always would get, in high stress situations, I would tend to tense up a little bit, and you get that feeling in your chest, and you can feel your heart rate speeding up, and it always put me off what I was trying to do, and I never understood it. And then coming into the ambulance service, I started feeling that again when I'd go to, because we have when you're driving back to the the jobs come down in MDT in the vehicle, and if that's a job that you see that job and it's like a red job, which is a high something serious, I could feel that adrenaline, and I could feel that that same feeling. And if you don't have control of that, it can affect your mind and your ability to remain calm and focused under pressure. And so when it started happening to me in the ambulance service, one of the things I found when I went to these jobs was that I found it hard to focus. I felt like, I'd almost get tunnel vision. And that started, for me, having to figure that out and having to learn what was actually happening so that I could control that. And it all comes back to your nervous system, your ability to regulate your own nervous system. And this is something that we should be training, especially in sport, elite sport performance.
Yeah, it's very relevant really to anyone, but when you look at specifically combat sport athletes, it's such a stressful environment. Like, the first thing you think of obviously is fight night. It's probably one of the most stressful situations that someone can be in, right? Going up against another trained killer in front of a lot of people. The lead up to it is something that everyone sort of understands as well. But something you mentioned in your other interview was that just the daily work of a combat athlete is actually a stressful environment for the body as well, and the mind. Yeah.
Yeah, we have to understand that stress can come from so many different ways, and it affects all of the body systems. And what we see with especially the fight athletes is overtraining and the effect that has, because overtraining is a stress, right? And that overtraining and that stress affects the nervous system, and it's just like the human body will adapt to any stimulus that you give it. So if you are overtraining, then your body will adapt to that, and their nervous system adapts, and that it gets stuck in what we call the red zone, the sympathetic division of your autonomic nervous system. And the prime hormone there is adrenaline, and adrenaline upregulates a lot of the body systems. So over time, those body systems adapt to being upregulated, and one of the key systems there is your breathing. So if you are spending a lot of time in a stress state, your breathing adapts to being faster, more upper chest, and then that feeds into stress. So there's a two-way cycle there. But yeah, it's all about the work that we're doing is all about how to balance that and how to push back against that stress. And the breathing is really a direct link to your nervous system. So to explain that a little bit, when you initiate the stress cycle, as a result of any stressor, your breathing is one of the first systems that becomes upregulated. So you start breathing faster. And if you can control that, if you can take conscious control of your breathing, slow down your breathing rate, then really what you have done is you've intercepted the physiological response to stress, and you've pushed back against that stress, and you now have control, because bottom-up control of stress is much easier than what we call top-down control of stress, which is trying to control your mind, which is a pretty crazy thing. It's much easier to take control of your body in order to elicit a calm state.
Yeah, man. And looking at what you were discussing and also your website, you're working a lot of the sort of areas, your key pillars is what you call it. They kind of like blend in together a little bit. You've mentioned in there movement, breath work, recovery, and mental resilience, but all seem to kind of work together, right? To work towards that performance improvement. Yeah.
What we'll do with an athlete or someone that's coming in to work with us is the first thing that we get them to understand is that the body is just a whole lot of systems, right? You have the breathing system, your digestive system, your muscular system, your cardiovascular system. all these systems that are made up are combined to form the human body, and we can break down every single one of those systems and then train those systems. And you can only reach peak performance once you reach optimal health. And optimal health is when you get all those systems humming, right? And when we talk to these athletes, the two systems that are trained the least that we see over and over again is the breathing system, the respiratory system, and the nervous system, which is just your brain, your spinal cord, all the nerves that innervate these different organs in your body, and I guess your mind. And they, the breathing system, respiratory system, and the nervous system are the two most important systems in order to remain calm and controlled under pressure. And we always hear, the mental game is the most important part of performance. Well, we should be training it, we've known for hundreds of years the powerful effects of, and especially now with the research in this area, the powerful effects of meditation, mindfulness, and breath work.
And you mentioned from the start about about working with people to correct imbalances, particularly with the body, etc. You mentioned yourself with a hip problem, but you also mentioned about the breathing imbalance. So what did you kind of mean by that?
Yeah, so that just comes back. A lot of the stuff comes back to your nervous system and your nervous system tone. And just to help make this more sense, make more sense, everyone has an autonomic nervous system. It's called autonomic because it takes care of all the things that you don't necessarily need to think about: your blood vessel diameter, digestion, blood pressure, heart rate, your breathing rate. And there are two divisions. There's the sympathetic branch, and that's like having the accelerator on in a car, and there's the parasympathetic branch, that's like putting the brakes on. And what we associate with the far end of these two divisions of the autonomic nervous system, the far end of the sympathetic nervous system is anxiety, and the far end of the parasympathetic is depression. And what we want to be able to do with our nervous system, that red part of the nervous system is often referred to as the fight or flight response. The prime hormone there is adrenaline, gears us up for action. What we want to be able to do is have more control. We want to be able to recognize, right, we're in too much of a sympathetic state. We need to push back against the stress and shift back into more of a parasympathetic state, or at least be able to balance it. It's like a dimmer switch. With the light, you can turn it right down, up, and you can turn it right down. It's exactly what we want to be able to do with our nervous system. And you can do that. And one of the great things about this is that we can train the nervous system. It's like any body system, you can tap into it and train it. And that's what we're doing with these athletes, and we're getting them to balance their nervous system. And when you do that, you improve your heart rate variability, but it also has a ripple-on effect into every facet of performance: your sleep, your recovery, injury prevention. So, this stuff is absolutely integral to performance. It has really surprised me, like I said, that it's not like a mainstay of, training, performance training. But it will be, especially this breathing training, I think you'll see in the next sort of 5 years. It takes 10 years for research to trickle down into the performance environment. And what we're starting to see now is this research is out there, and we know that we can train the respiratory system to improve athletic performance. And so it'll start being, just like strength and conditioning and cardio work, it'll start being a huge part of training.
Yeah, in the last couple of decades, we've seen so many improvements in that strength and conditioning alone. So yeah, we're gonna see a lot of changes as you see Geordie with diet, yourself with breathing, etc. Now, you mentioned just then about the breathing and everything, and also in your interviews, etc. You mentioned one of the first steps is just to be aware of your breathing. Like, as a layman, how would one go about that?
Yeah, so you have to understand that the breathing is innervated by the autonomic nervous system. So you don't necessarily have to think about your breathing at all, right? The unique thing about breathing is that you can control it. You can't directly control your blood vessel diameter or your heart rate or your digestion of food, but you can directly take control of your breathing. You could hold your breath right now. You could prolong your exhale. So in that way, by being able to take conscious control and train your breathing, you can use your breathing to elicit a calm state, to elicit that parasympathetic state. And that just involves slowing down your breathing rate, softening and quieting the breath, and finding a cadence. So we use breathing cadence as an example of that. Would be, we would assign numbers to the inhale, hold, exhale, hold. An example that we see all the time comes from something called box breathing. I think it comes from the Navy, which is a 4-4-4-4. 4 second inhale, 4 second hold, 4 second exhale, 4 second hold. But actually, I wouldn't find that calming. Someone else would find that calming. What I find calming is an 8-8-10-4. 8 second inhale, 8 second hold, 10 second exhale, 4 second hold. So when we work with the athletes, it's all about finding where their breathing tolerance is at and being able to program this work to their specific requirements. That probably went a little bit off track, but I guess what I'm trying to say is by taking conscious control of the breathing, slowing down the breathing rate, prolonging the exhale, we create more parasympathetic tone. When you train that over time, when you do that breathing cadence and you train your nervous system to shift into that calm state, well, the goal there is to be able to do it in a dynamic setting, right? In a fight, to be able to, when you're really under pressure and your back's up against the wall, to be able to slow things down and still be creative and focused. And so that's a lot of the work that we're doing with the fighters, is to train this every day so that it does become autonomic. In those dynamic moments, you're able to have control.
So would I be right in saying that this first sort of thing is just to be aware of the breath, and then working on different counts to just control and probably slow down the breathing a bit. And then from there, you look on more towards that improving performance through breathing, right?
Yeah. Okay. So, the first thing that we often tell clients that come in is, okay, go away for the next 3 to 4 days. I want you to be more consciously aware of your breathing. When you're stressed, what is your breathing doing? When you're happy, what is your breathing doing? When you're tired, what is your breathing doing? When you're anxious, what is your breathing doing? And by tapping into your breathing in these different emotional states, you're able to intercept stress in real time. You're able to get more of a feeling for what your breathing is doing, because when there is stress, fear, apprehension, tension, we tend to breathe fast. We tend to breathe into the upper chest. And, if you're spending a lot of your time doing that, then your body will adapt to that. So you will adapt and you will end up having a breathing pattern disorder around that adaptation, if that makes sense. So what we tend to think with elite athletes is that, they have all this stuff ironed out. I've had some of the fittest athletes come in that have poor breathing capacity. And that all starts back at the very basics, getting them more consciously aware of their breathing, improving their breathing mechanics, their ability to access their diaphragm, the primary muscle of breathing. Respiratory muscle training, breathing muscle training is very specific. We can tap into these breathing muscles and improve their ability to expand on the inhale and contract on the exhale. And that's so important to not only strengthen these muscles, but make sure that these muscles are fatigue resistant and that we have good access to them.
Yeah, it sounds amazing. And like looking at a performance of an elite athlete, be it an MMA athlete or be it someone else, a different sport, how much sort of improvement can people make, do you think, in their kind of aerobic capacity or anaerobic capacity through working like this with the breath? Like, is there any percentage you could throw at it as an average or anything? Or like what sort of performance improvement can it lead to?
Yeah, there are huge adaptations that can be made to every facet of performance through breathing training, to the mind, to the nervous system, to your rest, your recovery, your ability to transition from energized to relaxed states. This stuff is tethered to every single facet of performance. And people come in and they say, we're looking for 1%. Well, how much time, energy, and focus are you putting into training your breathing system, into your nervous system? It's normally below 50%. There's way more than 1% here. You have to think of it like this. We spend so much time training strength and conditioning, the muscular system, our cardio, the cardiovascular system. And we're just not tapping into the breathing system. But it is we are just made up of trillions of cells, and those cells use oxygen and glucose to create energy. So oxygen, the delivery of oxygen to these cells is the very fundamental of health and performance, and you can improve your ability to oxygenate well. You know, one of the things that we see with the breathing training, one of the big things that we see is these athletes' ability to recover faster. If you think of in between rounds in a fight, when you go back to the corner, what do you have in order to recover? There is no external sources there. So you have to rely internally on your ability to recover faster. So then what can you tap into internally? Your mind. That's not really internal, that's external. But your breathing, that's all you have. And actually, your breathing system is, by tapping into your breathing system, it is the fastest way to recover, to down-regulate these other body systems, your heart rate, your blood pressure, you know, focus the mind. It's all done through slowing down your breathing. And so we do a lot of work on improving breathing mechanics, so your ability to expand on the inhale. Because if you don't have, there's two things we're interested, rate and depth. If you don't have good depth, and when I refer to depth, I just refer to your ability to expand the breathing muscles, take them through their full range. If you don't have good depth, then you are going to compensate by increasing the rate. If you increase the rate, it's going to have a direct effect on endurance, right? Because these are big muscle groups. Let's just take two fighters, one, and they're putting out the same output. One of these fighters is trained breathing and the other hasn't. One is breathing at 40 times per minute, and the other, because they've trained to improve their breathing capacity, is breathing at 30 times a minute. Well, the one breathing at 30 times a minute is going to be using less energy, right? So it has a massive effect on endurance. And actually, if you breathe too fast, it agitates the mind, because you're actually blowing off too much carbon dioxide. And when you blow off too much carbon dioxide, because it causes cerebral vasoconstriction. So the blood vessels, the cerebral blood vessels constrict, reduce blood flow to the brain, which agitates the mind. So, man, there's so many different facets of breathing training that we could talk about, but it sounds quite convoluted. It's not. The exercises are very simple. Yeah, it's just like any body system. Like any body system, it takes time to create these adaptations. Yeah, man,
it's something that I think if we start to think about, like, if you think about it in the training, it's actually something that's kind of relevant. It's if you make yourself aware of it, you can see people around you within a training context of martial arts that are breathing incorrectly, like people that hyperventilate a little bit when they're you know, in some sort of stressful position, etc., where they could definitely improve just their basic breathing practice to, you know, not expend energy that they need to expend, and also to, you know, like you said, breathe less with more efficiency. Yeah, it's something that definitely not looked at enough.
Yeah, I think like what most athletes will do is they'll start training and they'll just start breathing too fast because they have no awareness of it. They're not thinking about it. Yeah, so a lot of the training we do is about controlling the rate, slowing the rate down. If it was just for oxygenation, so if it was just for getting oxygen into your body, you would only have to breathe 2 to 3 times a minute. Our breathing rate is set on the level of carbon dioxide in our body. And carbon dioxide is the byproduct of cellular metabolism. So oxygen and glucose create energy in the form of ATP, and the offset of that is CO2. And as CO2 builds up in your blood, the CO2 detectors detect that build-up, send signals to the brain, to the respiratory center in the brain, which then send neural signals through to the diaphragm to contract faster. So a lot of the work we do is building up your tolerance towards CO2, improving your tolerance towards CO2. A lot of that training comes from like free diving. Those guys and girls train breath hold work so that they can dive deeper on one breath. We train breath hold work to improve CO2 tolerance so that at any given level of exertion, your breathing is lighter and more controlled, which again has a direct effect on endurance, power production, mental focus, your ability to recover. And a lot of these fighters are reaching their breathing capacity in the ring. And when you know what to look for, I find it frustrating because I watch these fights and you see an athlete reach their breathing capacity in the ring, So whether that be that they have been breathing too fast and that's had an energy cost associated with it, or whether they have respiratory muscle fatigue. So those respiratory muscles are actually fatigued because they've been breathing too fast, too hard. It's very evident to see when an athlete, fight athlete, hits their breathing capacity in the ring. The mouth is wide open, and they're just more or less hyperventilating.
Yeah, man. And what out of the athletes that you work with, who would be a prime sort of example that we could look at for having kind of harnessed this a little bit more and as a living example of working with the breath a bit more?
Yeah, I think all
I know Geordie mentioned Brad Riddell, right? Is that one of the key ones that you'd take a look at and during his fight, I mean, and just seeing like how he looks like he's controlling the breathing?
Yep. Yeah, he's a good example of someone who's taken this stuff on, and then Brad's like on a bit of another level in terms of just giving him the exercises isn't enough. He wants to understand it, and so he actually went and got and learnt about this stuff, and even got certified. So he's a great example of someone, who because I think like with anything, if you don't understand the underlying mechanisms, you're never going to get as much out of it. You've got to understand the thing in order to be able to apply it, right? I think that's where a lot of athletes go wrong, is they just do the thing without understanding it. So Brad is a great example of someone that really took the time to understand the stuff, because I guess it is quite it's quite new and can be difficult to understand. But yeah, like I said, actually, again, it's quite, the exercises and the way that we program the training is quite simple. But yeah, all of the fight athletes, I think they're such a great candidate for this breathing training, because they all know what it's, the stakes are so high when you're in the ring, right? And they all know what it's like to reach their breathing capacity in the ring. Instinctively, when you talk about it, they're like, oh yeah, I remember that happening, and I guess, it's a really horrible place to be when you don't have control of your breathing in the ring.
Yeah.
True, I guess Israel was a great example of someone that could just take things and then apply it. He was very good. He's very good at, again, operating on another level where he can just, take things and then he just knows how to apply it into fighting.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
And I saw quite a few things of you doing breath hold work with these guys, like in a pool or also in the ocean. Looks quite interesting.
Yeah, the pool work is, a lot of the breathing-based training is either sitting down or lying on your back, and it's not something that you can sort of like film and it looks amazing, right? So, but a lot of it is just, you're not in the pool, you're just sitting there doing breath work, and not only do we want to train this in a static setting, we also want it to be dynamic. The pull work is kind of almost a little bit separate. Yeah, we are training the breathing because you have to hold your breath, but the pull work is really about being able to control the mind and being able to deal with stress and pressure. And I think with all of the stuff, you have to take the athlete out of their environment into a different environment, teach them the thing so that then they can take it and then apply it. And unless you have practical scenarios for, so they have to understand the theory, but then you have to be able to apply it with these athletes in a practical setting, right? Because that's the only way it's gonna stick. And so the pool is an incredible place to be able to do that, because when you're under the water, if you become stressed, you're not going to be able to hold your breath for long. As soon as that stress comes in, you need to know how to use it to get more relaxed. And that type of training ripples over again into every facet of performance.
I saw a video the other day of the guys running underwater. It looked like were they carrying weights or they weighted and running underwater. It kind of takes him back to some of the old training, some of the famous BJJ guys would do. I think it was it BJ Penn or one of the old fighters where I think they'd pick up a rock and run underwater and come back up, some old Hawaiian lifeguarding technique.
Yeah, nothing's new, right? Like all this stuff, man. I think it's funny because, like, as we move forward, I think we tend to look back to find this stuff, you know, and sometimes you got to go back quite far and you'll find that, you know, they did this stuff back in the day. And a lot of this breathing stuff comes from yoga and Tai Chi, but it is not the exercise, it's the application, it's how you apply it, because the exercises are all there, right? It's like, you know, we have recovery protocols, sauna use and cold water immersion. And if you just go and sit in a cold tub without any idea of what you're doing, it's almost pointless. Yeah, so it's, again, not the exercise, it's how you apply it, when you apply it, and getting people to understand it and be able to transition it over into what they're doing, whether it be fighting or any sport or the corporate world. Yeah, and I guess that's something that I'm good at. Yeah.
That's it, man. Hey, talking about Brad Riddell and your other interview, you talked about the gears, or I think it was gears of breathing or something. Would you be able to just touch on that? Just give a quick overview of what that is.
Yeah, so that's in the early stages of learning how to better control your breathing at differing levels of intensity. There are different styles of breathing, right? So when the intensity is low, like if you're doing recovery or just day to day, you know, you should probably be light nasal breathing. It should be soft, quiet, light. You shouldn't be able to hear it. And then as you're doing some form of, you know, low level exercise, you're probably going to have to shift a little bit more air. So you might start, we have like a moderate nasal inhale, moderate nasal exhale. Should be able to hear it, but it should still be controlled. You should still have good access to your diaphragm, good ability to expand, and you should be controlling the rate. And then as the intensity increases, then you might shift to a nasal breath in, mouth breath out. Again, you're still controlling the rate and your access to or your ability to expand. And then when you're in that red zone, you know, that anaerobic threshold and above, you're probably going to be using your mouth in and out for that short bursts of energy. But what we tend to see is that so many of these athletes start mouth breathing even at low intensity training and exercise. And again, you know, with that type of breathing, it's normally associated with the accessory muscles of breathing, the upper chest, the shoulders, the neck. It's normally quite a shallow breath, and the rate is normally too fast, because if you think about, even just now, if you're listening, if you breathe through your mouth and then close your mouth and breathe in through your nose, and what you'll notice straight away is that when you breathe in through your nose, there's more resistance to airflow because it's a smaller hole. So it's going to slow down the breathing. It's going to pull that air deeper into the base of the lung where we want it for better oxygenation. And that's also, you're using, you know, the part of your anatomy that was designed for breathing. Your mouth isn't designed for breathing, it's designed for eating. It has a tongue, you know, salivary glands, teeth. It's the start of the digestive tract. And the nose, you know, has nostrils and, you know, I think it's over 100 intricate structures designed to humidify and purify the air, and it even has a gas, nitric oxide, which when you breathe through your nose is carried into the lungs and dilates blood vessels to promote better oxygenation. So I think, you know, just as a species, like if you look at any other species, they in the world, you know, you look at your dog, your cat, they all breathe and expand out laterally. Inhale, expand, exhale, contract. I think we're the only species who have gone away from that type of breathing to a vertical type of breath where we, and a lot of that comes back to stress and the shit food that we're eating, and just our complacent adaptation to our lifestyles has really affected the breathing, and then that has had a ripple-on effect into our nervous system, upregulated our nervous systems, and that's had a huge effect on anxiety. And, you know, 1 in 5, I think it's 1 in 5 people in New Zealand with anxiety, and we're telling these people to meditate or to go and get medicated or see a psychologist. Well, you have to address some of these underlying issues that are stimulating the stress, which is breathing. Their bodies have just adapted to chronic stress. I work with a lot of non-athletes, just people that are really stressed, man. I had a client this morning that with the effects of having a mortgage and a small family and trying to make the business work and just all of these stresses, and you can see the ripple-on effect. This guy's got a breathing pattern disorder. He's put on weight. He's not sleeping well. He's agitated. His nervous system is affected. So, yeah, this is stuff that we need to be talking about in New Zealand at the moment. Where are you? You're in Australia?
I'm Australian, but I'm living in China.
Yeah, right. So we're all in the middle of this pandemic, right? Which is, and different countries are affected differently, but New Zealand has just come through this pandemic, which we're still in, and what a great opportunity for the health organisations to come out and talk about this stuff. And of course they have, but man, it's been in the background for sure.
No one's talking about it, man. It's ridiculous, right? Like, it's just ridiculous that one of the key things about not being sick, etc., is well-being and health, etc. And no one's really doing it. It's just all about getting injections and whatnot.
Yeah, I think nowadays we rely on other people too much, man. It's like if we get sick or we get some symptoms, we go to a specialist, right, or to the doctor or to the physio, the chiropractor, the osteopath. There's all these specialized people, right? I always think that you should just be able to, you should have the skills to look after your own body. Man, this is a huge thing that I learned coming through chronic pain and the effect it had on my nervous system, the effect it had on every system in my body, and then really relying on other people to fix me. And one of the big shifts I made was like, right, I always thought if I could get all these people in a room, the muscular therapist, the hip specialist, the chiropractor, the osteopath, I would probably make some really good progress. But you'd go and see a specialist and they look at you like this, right, through their specialization. And so one of the things that I realized was, man, I'm going to have to learn this stuff myself, and I'm going to have to learn how to look after my body myself, look into the nutrition and the recovery and sleep hygiene, and how we can use these heat and cold and the breathing stuff. And I think pain, I always say, pain is the great motivator, and I was in a lot of pain, and it really motivated me to fix this problem.
Well, we're in a great position to do that now, right? Like, just with the explosion of the internet over the last decade, we can just find everything. Like, we can find people like yourself that we can learn certain things, and then we can take that and try and integrate into our own, own issues and try and improve ourselves.
Also, it's one of the biggest problems as well, though, right? Because you just take something like nutrition and you jump online. It's like a minefield, right? Like, one guy's telling you that eggs is a superfood, the other saying it's poison. You should be eating only meat. Vegetables are terrible for you. Man, it is. I can see how people are confused, right? I don't think we've ever been in a time where there's more good information out there, but it's hidden amongst all this bullshit, and you have to be able to sift through all that bullshit. And the problem is that people buy into the bullshit. And then it becomes very confusing. So yeah, all the information is out there. I think the healthier people are getting healthier, and the unwell people are getting more unwell. And it's just becoming this void, right? And then you got all the people in the middle that don't really care where they lie and are just too busy.
Sure, it's difficult to sort, but if you got that sorting down there, there is some valuable stuff out there, right?
I think it comes back to the simple things. Don't try and overcomplicate things. Even with this breathing training, man, it's like, it is the simple stuff done effectively. It's like anything. If you just look at fighting is like a great analogy for everything. I feel like, even for life. But if you look at a fight, what are the basics? Like your jab, right? And setting your stance and your movement, and it actually just comes back. And you see this win fights over and over again. The basics done right, the basics done well. Well, it's the same with this training, and we just complicate things, man. I think especially in this breathing space, people there's a lot of coming into the space now, a lot of breathing coaches, you can go and get certified and become a breathing coach, right? And I think a lot of people like the to create that mystery around this breathing stuff. Well, it's not mysterious. It's like, it's basic stuff. So breathing, it couldn't be more basic. I'll tell you just one thing, man, like the language is so important, and the language that we're using around this breathing stuff has been wrong for so long. Breathe into your belly. Like when I hear that, it makes me so frustrated, because like you are telling someone to breathe into their belly, which means nothing. Yeah, you don't breathe into your belly. You get good access to your diaphragm, and you learn how to breathe in a mechanically sound way. What does that mean? Well, then we break it down and we explain it to these people that we run an online breathing. You know, we do one-on-one training, but we also run online via Zoom all over the world. And the first thing is getting them to getting the language right, getting them to understand what is the diaphragm, what does it look like, what happens when it contracts, what happens to the rib cage when the diaphragm contracts. Well, the rib cage expands laterally and up, so it moves like this. Okay, and so it's not about breathing into your belly, and all the esoteric language that I think a lot of that has come from like yoga. Not to, you know, yoga is incredible, obviously, but we've got to get now into the performance environment. We have to get the language right.
Yeah, that's true, man. Hey, just to jump ship slightly to a subject I want to cover before we run out of time. Something that resonated with me a bit was you talking about, obviously you talked about imbalances with breathing, but also body imbalance. Like as someone who's trained combat sports for a long time, I can feel myself that I'm out of balance, just even walking, to be honest, is just, I can feel that I'm tight and stiff and I move in a pretty, strange sort of way compared to, like, I can function well in a sporting sort of era. Like if I'm in a gym, shadow boxing, whatever, I can look great. But then just doing some simple things is kind of impeded because of, tightness developed over the years of doing a particular movement. Could you talk on that a little bit?
Yeah. So how long have you been fighting for?
Training for a couple of decades, heavily for a couple of decades, I would say.
Yeah. The body is incredible at adapting. So again, any stimulus you give the body, it will adapt to that. That's what the human body does. It adapts. And you have just adapted your muscular system, your nervous system, your ligaments, your tendons, everything in your body, your movement patterns have all adapted to your specialization, right? And part of that specialization, if you don't correct those imbalances, they become ingrained patterns. But that goes back before you started all this training. It goes back to like when you're a kid wearing shoes. We weren't designed, the human was not designed to wear shoes, that's for sure. It offsets your body mechanics. And then you sit for 10 years at school and your body maps these positions, right? And so you get stuck. A lot of people get stuck at that. In the Eastern cultures, they don't hip replacements are like reserved for like trauma scenarios where you get injured. Like, and now in the Western world, by the time you get to 50, it's pretty common to like have some sort of hip issue because we're stuck at 90 degrees because we sit all the time. But yeah, man, you've just adapted to what you specialize in, and so that what you're feeling is your body just adapted to that. That's why it's so important to as part of your recovery work to do, to work on that imbalance with functional exercise and mobility and prehab and be able to iron out those deficiencies. I think a lot of us are very tight through the anterior chain, the hip flexors, and very weak reciprocally through the posterior chain, and that has all sorts of. But just one thing that's interesting about that is, the breathing is linked to our movement. And when we see people that don't have good access to their diaphragm and good ability to expand 360 degrees, they get very tight through the posterior rib cage. Because when you breathe in, the posterior rib cages are supposed to expand, right? When you have good diaphragmatic excursion, you actually get 360 degrees expansion of your rib cage. And what we see is a lot of people find it hard to expand through that posterior rib cage, that thoracic part of your rib cage. And when that gets really tight and immobile, the lumbar spine compensates. And we see a lot of lumbar compensation. The lumbar spine is like, for any range, if you can't hit in range, like with lifting your arms overhead or coming into hip flexion, you will find that your lumbar spine will compensate to get in range in most movement patterns. And so we get a lot of disc wear and tear and issues with non-specific lower back pain.
Yeah, man. And with the stand-up type of combat, people seem like myself have kind of rounded shoulders, you know, like shoulders coming forward.
Shoulders forward, yeah. But that's like everything in life now is geared towards that forward posture, you know, like if you even think about like any specialization, painting, forward, you know, sitting at a desk, forward, it's all very much forward orientated. It's interesting how like we have adapted to that over time and like the effect it's had on us, and even like with this imbalance you're talking about, it's underlying stress, like because you're talking about, you know, you're walking and you can feel something's not quite right. Well, that's stress, right? And that results in like pain and tension, and it feeds back into that nervous system being upregulated. So that type of stuff you want to be able to balance out. Again, it comes back to like understanding the stuff yourself and doing that extra work, because any specialization will cause imbalance.
It actually makes sense. Like just popping into my head, the same sort of thing for breathing, right? Just being aware of those imbalances before, and then you can start to work on them, right? Yeah,
if you're not aware of it, people are so busy now. They just it's almost like they live outside their bodies, right? And they're so busy, but then they start getting symptoms, you know, and those symptoms could be like headaches or digestive issues, irritable bowel syndrome, some sort of skin rash, or, you know, neck pain. Well, what's the underlying thing? Because we all want to fix the symptom, but there's always an underlying thing, right? And a lot of the time that underlying thing is the result of chronic stress and how your body has adapted to that. You know, people come in and they tell me, you know, I've got this, my neck is constantly, and my traps and my shoulders are constantly tight. Well, if your nervous system is stuck in that sympathetic state, fight, flight, or freeze, it's holding that tension. And people, like, when we get them to be more consciously aware of their breathing throughout the day, when they tap into their breathing, it's great because it actually gets them to tap into this muscle tension that they're holding, you know, and that they're like, fuck, I'm all day just holding this tension. So we get them to, you know, not only take conscious control of the breathing, but also to do these body scans to find where they're holding tension and let it go. And they always come back and it's like, man, I just didn't realize I was holding this constant, you know, muscular tension.
Yeah, it's something I've heard a bit in the what's it called, like meditation things before, about scanning the body, right? It kind of crosses over a little bit.
Yeah, I think we can all like I think nowadays we can all, this resonates with every single person, you know, because we're all exposed to the stresses of life. Unless you live like, you know, out in a rural area somewhere and you're totally connected with the land and, you know, you don't have all these modern day stresses. I think we're all in the same boat where we all need to have tools to be able to push back against the stress. If you can't push back against the stress, then your body will just adapt to that stress. And some of those adaptations are some of those symptoms I talked about. Man, it's a crazy time to be a human being. Especially if you know, if you live in the city surrounded by concrete and the pace is so fast. And yeah.
Cool. So actually, I got a couple of questions from my BJJ professor. Actually, I actually don't even know really what he's talking about. I'm just going to read it to you, and you can help me a little bit if you don't mind. He had to listen to the podcast on my recommendation with Geordie the fight dietitian, and he had a couple of questions. He said, what do you think of James Nestor's suggestion of using Homeo Block?
What do I think of James Nestor's suggestion of using what?
It says Homeo Block. Do you know what that is?
Homeo Block.
I don't know. I'd seen it's written, so I don't even know what it is, man, to be honest. If you don't know, I can just cut that part out and ask you the next question.
I'm intrigued. How do you spell it?
He's written HOMEO Block.
Homeo Block. Oh yeah. Homeo Block appliance is a revolutionary patent oral device that looks much like a retainer, but the results go well beyond simply straightening your teeth before and after. Yeah, I think what he's getting is that our jaw structure has changed. This is part of like this complacent adaptation that's happened over hundreds of years. And one of, if anyone's ever read Jane Nestor's book, he talks a lot about how facial structure has changed over time, secondary to how we breathe, but also the food that we're eating. From a young age, we eat food that's all mashed up, and so we don't get that strong jaw. But what actually ends up happening is the jaw sits further back, and the whole airway anatomy and the oropharynx in your mouth changes, and part of that is that the teeth become overcrowded. And I think that device is about opening that back up. Again, I think it's probably like, I don't know too much about it, but it's interesting.
And the other question he had, which I don't know if you know about either, but he said, what do you think on someone undergoing nose surgery to correct septum deviation? Does even a minor deviation warrant surgery to improve nasal breathing, performance, etc.?
Yeah, I don't know the research or stats on that, but I know that like a lot of the clients that we get in have deviated septums. And what ends up happening is, like, you think about the human body, man, if something becomes difficult or hard to do, a lot of the time we stop using it and the body finds compensatory patterns, right? So just like if you're really tight through your thoracic spine, your lumbar spine will start compensating. If you've got weak glutes, then the body will look upstream or downstream to compensate. That's what the body does. And I've forgotten the question. What were we talking about?
Talking about the septum deviation.
Yeah, the septum deviation. So a lot of them get a deviated septum, and then because that creates a little bit more resistance to airflow, they stop using it and they start using the mouth. As soon as you stop using something, it becomes inflamed and congested. So the first thing that we get with these athletes who have deviated septums, right, you're going to go away from 3 days and you're going to start using your nose for breathing. Yeah. During rest, recovery, and light exercise, you're going to use only your nose. And they come back after 3 days and they're like, far out. You know, all that inflammation has resolved, and I feel like, you know, I can use it again now. And a lot of the time, those people are predisposed to upper respiratory tract infections because they're not using it. It gets congested. And then I always think, like, if something's not working, then fix it if you can. You know, you can undergo an operation to fix a deviated septum. I'm not sure on the you know, the research or the efficacy of that, but you know, yeah, if it's broken, fix it if you can.
Yeah, that's it, man. Hey, I just a couple of last things. I noticed some of the videos I've seen with the CKB guys training with you a bit, working on the beach area. Where is that, man? It looks very beautiful.
That is the west coast of the North Island, at a place called Piha, P-I-H-A. It's the beach that's right next to Kari, which is where they filmed The Piano, which is a famous movie. Piha is like 50 minutes from Auckland Central, the biggest city in New Zealand. But it's like you have to drive through what we call the Waitakere Ranges, which is all bush. And so it's separated from the city by this drive, this 20k drive through the Auckland Regional Park, and you come out on this black iron sand beach. And I've been all over the world, traveled all over the world, surfing. And whenever I'd come back to New Zealand, I'd drive down the hill, get to the first lookout, and I'd pull over and I'd look down the coast, and I would always think to myself, man, there is nothing else in the world like this, because of the crazy combination of the Waitakere forest that comes right down to the beach, which is iron sand, which is it's called titanomagnetite. It's volcanic rock from the Taranaki region that has been deposited along the shores over millions and millions of years. And then you have the Tasman Sea, which is this crazy, you know, ocean that is, you know, you normally have to wait for the surf to drop to be able to, you know, it's got so much energy, so much raw energy. And so part of this training that we're doing on the beach is using all of that energy and connecting back to the land, which we're so disconnected from nowadays.
Yeah, definitely one of the most beautiful parts of the world. I came over and actually had a look at CKB and went for a tour up the coast there. Saw some beautiful dolphins and beautiful, just beautiful land and sea around there. Really somewhere I'd like to get back to once we can finally travel a little again.
Yeah, you're always welcome here, bro. You can come out here, do some training, and you'd always be welcome out here.
I think I'll take you up on that, man. When I can eventually travel, I want to get the family over there. They've never been there, so I want to come have a look one day with them. So
what are you doing in China?
Well, I work in a casino over here, man. I'm working in Macau. Macau, China it's like they call it the Vegas of Asia. It's got heaps of massive casinos and obviously Chinese love to gamble. So yeah, that's what it's about. So trapped on a kind of small island for the last 2 years. Not too much fun, but it's all right. I'm still surviving.
What a life.
That's it, man. Anyway, man, we'll kick off. We'll finish up because you're running out of time here. Again, thank you so much for your time. I feel like we've only touched on the things that we could talk about. There's so much to really delve into, but given, I think, some good ideas for if anyone listens to kind of have a little bit more of a thought about their breathing and balancing and how that can affect their overall life and performance. So thank you so much, man.
Yeah. For the listeners, if you want to go away with something, the thing that I would say is just go away and be more conscious of your breathing. And you're probably breathing too fast, especially when you're training. So, there's some really good practices you can start implementing into your day-to-day life. And one of those practices is what we call cadence breathing, which is just slowing down the breathing rate, breaking the breathing into 4 pillars, I guess. Inhale, hold, exhale, relax. Exhale, hold. It's called box breathing. You can Google it, and you can just assign different numbers to those different parts of the breathing cycle. And what I'll say to that is always make sure that exhale is the longest number. So if the inhale is 4 seconds, the exhale should be 6 seconds. And the reason for that is the exhale is more passive. It's linked to that parasympathetic division of the nervous system and creates a very calming effect. And you feel that if everyone just inhales now. Hold, 3, 2, 1, and then exhale out and relax the body. And you can get into a practice of doing that for like 10, 15 minutes a day. That's meditation, incredibly calming. And if any of the listeners want to, we do online breathing training all over the world. All our programming is online. So you can, if you've got any questions, you can email me through the website or on Instagram. Yeah,
I'll throw the Instagram handle on the screen, which is WNW_integrated_training, correct?
That's it, man.
Yep, and also Woody's Movement Workshop website. So yeah, anyone interested in catching up can find you there.
Yeah, I was really impressed when I jumped on this podcast and saw all the WNW logos in the background. Man, that's fantastic. I've actually I've got to get a photo of that. And I appreciate you having me on, John, and I appreciate what you're doing as well, man.
Okay, man. Thank you very much. And we'll talk again sometime, man. Thank you.